Good morning, my creative friends. Great to see everyone here. I am just back from a beautiful, beautiful walk on this glorious summer morning. This is Painting in Your PJs Live with Minette's summer version. So, for Painting in Your PJs Live, we are currently meeting Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. So, if you are able to join us live, that is fantastic. If you're here watching the replay, welcome. Just trying to get all my screen stuff set up here. So bear with me for just a second. So I'm super excited for where we are in our journey, or where I am in my creative journey. Painting in your pajamas or your t-shirts or whatever is all about using art as a process for personal discovery. It's a journey to personal growth. And my aim is to make it fun and playful. And I've been reading this amazing book. I've mentioned it a couple of times now, called Your Brain on Art. Highly, highly recommend this. It's a great read. Good morning, Yvonne. Welcome. And there is so much in there that just affirms everything I know intuitively about making art. And I am going to switch my camera and I'm going to dive right in. So, what I know is that the more that I engage in free play with my art, the more satisfied I am with the practice. That when we get stuck in our creative practice is when we have a preconceived notion of what we want things to look like or how we want them to turn out. And then we become tied to that preconceived notion and we don't have access to curiosity or creative innovation. And so, what I want to be showing here with this practice of learning to let go is staying in the question, staying in the curiosity and the play of the canvas. And this week, I am painting through my emotions and feelings, which are pretty darn happy this morning. And I'm going to start the same way that I start every morning. So, step one of my morning art activation process is always just connecting to my feelings. And I can connect to my feelings through words, through images, through shape, through color. Good morning, Mary. Thanks for joining us live this morning. And I'm going to paint over this canvas that I painted yesterday. Even though I really love this canvas, I did take a photo of it to use later. The texture and the movement really captured where I was at yesterday, but I'm in a different place today. And so when I start to really think about how I'm feeling, like I feel good, my body feels strong, I went for a nice walk, but at the same time, my brain right now, and we'll see if this is going to write over the top of this. My brain right now feels like pretty scattered and maybe even like there's too many words in here right now. And so it's not words that are coming. Sometimes it really is words, and I can really connect through words, but sometimes I have to go to shape or image or just squiggly lines first. And so, if this is my brain, it feels like there's a million things firing in different directions. And in one of the sections of the book, he talks, they talk, it's actually two women, not he, but they talk about, good morning, Marion, neurodiversity in our brain, and a term that's been popularized recently, which is neurodivergent, which is people that just think differently, that process information very differently. And I think a lot of creatives fall in that spectrum of neurodiversity or neurodivergence, and we think differently about things. But part of the challenge with the world that we live in today, these circles are making me really happy over here. Part of the challenge that we live in, I'm getting distracted by the circles, is that we're distracted by so much input all of the time that we're actually losing some of what's called our executive function, which is our ability to read a piece of information and absorb it and remember it, right? So we're flooded constantly with messages, with information, with input. And it's why I am such an advocate for what I call deep rest, which is one of the 6 stages of my creative compass. And I'm just going to keep making some marks here. Again, it was felt more like shapes and color this morning than words. And when we're in a constant state of input, it's really hard to be creative in our output. That what we need as human beings is absence of input, or what I call deep rest, meaning there's times that we spend just sitting, gazing off into space, that we give ourselves permission to daydream, to let our thoughts roam, because that's when interesting connections and thoughts start to arise. And as someone who finds it hard to sit still and do nothing, I find that I can create a version of that deep rest on the page by sitting in silence and just putting color on the page. Even more effective, coloring one of our sacred circle designs. It's been proven now by science multiple times that coloring mandalas increases focus time after time. They're in because the shapes are already there, and because our brain loves a circle, right? As you can see, my brain loves a circle. It allows us to really just zero in on the moment. And the more that we do it, the more that it increases relaxation, but it also is beneficial for focus. And I found, I was reading the book this morning and I got to the page where they were talking about executive function, and they said, you know, you might have read this page and then not remembered what you read at all. And that happens to me all the time. And I have to go back and reread because my brain is off in some different place, right? So here I am again, letting go of the canvas that was there, starting with something new. I could have chosen to gesso over, but there's something around creating a palimpsest of layers where the undercolors continue to just flow and bleed through that I find really fun and creates a really powerful look on the page. So I want to get this black from that Posca marker really dry, and then I'll decide where to go next. I know a couple of you said you've gotten the book, or I think Marion, you said you'd finished reading it. I'm curious what other people's thoughts are about your brain on art and how you approach art making as a process. This was super wet. I'm having a hard time getting it dry. It does not want to get dry, so let me just grab a sheet of paper here and we'll just put some of those last pieces off. I just don't want all that black mixing with whatever comes next. Yeah, there's still some in there. I'm getting most of it off. And then we're starting to build up some interesting blotches of paint on this page too. And what are other people working on? It's so funny because I know that this process of painting over a canvas is one of the most challenging things that I teach people, that I get the most feedback on all the time. And I want to put a layer in here of, I think, clear gesso. I could also do matte medium. I want to seal this layer down so that if I want to push back to some of these color or marks, I can. And so I have some clear gesso here. So I think I'm just going to put some clear gesso on here and see what happens. It's going to look white to start with, but it does dry pretty clear. And that black's going to smear a little bit. And I'm just going to have to be okay with that. What are other people working on this morning? So I'm always curious to hear what it is that you're doing while I'm painting over here. I know some people follow along and other people work on other projects. Other people listen and sip their coffee. Loving all these just little, almost like little dendrites, little bits and pieces of interconnectedness that are just kind of showing up on the canvas. And so I'm just sort of playing with what's there, playing with what's there. And then let's go ahead, just clean that off. And I'm going to get that dry one more time and then decide where to go next. Watching and sipping water. Oh, you're doing index card a day. So working on your card. Fantastic. Love it. All right, so it's looking pretty dark right now. So I love it. Marion says she calls her need to tune out Creativity Island. Love it. And you do best when you have a lot of space. Same, right? I work in a variety of different ways, but in the quiet is often my favorite. Leslie's clearing workspace for Beyond the Page. You're an early bird, Leslie. I haven't even thought about clearing my space for that yesterday. My friend Andrea and I are hosting a virtual retreat Beyond the Page 2.0 this weekend. Super excited for that. I've been having so much fun painting fabric with watercolor in preparation for that. All right, it's got to go. So this is interesting. I'm going to take a picture of it just so I'm keeping pictures of each of the layers because I think that's an important part of the process. But I feel like I've kind of scribbled out some of the energy that I was feeling, the scatteredness in my brain, and I'm wanting to maybe bring a little more focus to the page. Your shrine to creativity, that sounds amazing. Is that a soul collage project, an actual shrine? Love, love, love. All right. So my idea yesterday was to be inspired by the texture on this page and maybe even the colors, but I think I'm not feeling drawn to the colors, but I am loving the textures and the patterns. Then maybe this concrete isn't speaking to me that much. So maybe I want to change this up and look at what is it that I'm loving about this? And again, I think it's those combinations of textures that somehow feel appealing to my eye visually, but also soothing to my brain. And there's something about, there's a lot less activity happening. There's some craziness here, and then there's this flourishing and blooming that's happening. So I want to sort of mimic that somehow on the canvas and see where I get to because it just feels interesting and soothing. But it was important that I took some time to kind of get all the gunk out of my head and onto the page. And my next step is to decide if I want to just go for color or do I need to gesso this over with some white and brighten it up? But I think I'm just going to go for it. And I'm also going to decide it's really useful to always turn your canvas around and look at it in different directions. Interestingly, this is an inexpensive canvas board from Michael's, and it has a thing where it can stand on the table. And I usually just take those off because I'm kind of liking having this go this way because I already have this texture here, but there's something that's creating more of that spaciousness up there. So I'm going to go with it. I'm really liking it too and sort of curious about where it's going. Painted matchbox with door handles on the split top. Love it. Oh, I can't wait. I hope you'll send pictures. That sounds absolutely amazing, Marion. So, kind of digging these colors and thinking maybe I want to go for the patterns, but sort of maybe mimic some of the colors that are already here and try not to get paint all over my nice new book, which will probably last about 3 minutes. Okay, this copper is kind of calling my name. So I'm just going to play with some paint here for a minute. And you'll notice for the last 2 days, I haven't used a brush that it does feel kind of like a peacock feather for sure, that I've only been using this one tiny little scraper here. And I often work this way when I'm painting intuitively. I find a brush can maybe get just a little bit limiting. And I tend to want to then sort of get precise and detailed. And one of my favorite stories in the book, Your Brain on Art, was a story about a guy that is well known for doing really innovative leadership coaching. And there was a point in time, and it's talked about a lot in business circles. So I had heard the story, parts of the story before, but about Starbucks, where Starbucks was doing really badly and was in a tailspin and losing profits. And, of course, you have to figure out how to fix that. So they brought the founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, out of retirement. He stepped back into leadership to help figure out what was going on. And he hired this guy whose name I can't remember right now. So I'm loving this. It's sort of calming down that texture, but I can still see the colors and the movement there. And Howard Schultz came in and hired this guy that's super innovative in doing all kinds of leadership training. And I'm kind of digging the purples and the blues. And I'm kind of thinking maybe the bubbles are the purple, and maybe I'm going to put a coat of blue here. And there were 22 leaders and managers that were invited to this creative retreat, this blue, same blue I used before, at an old loft in downtown Seattle. And when the guy was working on the leadership training, he said that he could have spent their 3 days together focused on analytics and solutions and trying to think their way through what all the problems and challenges were and how to get back. The goal was to figure out how do we make a Starbucks an iconic company. And I think at that point they were probably well on their way to becoming or already were iconic, but they were struggling. And so what this guy did was to curate this amazing creative experience for this team of leaders. So when they walked in the door, good morning, Vicki. So when they walked in the door, and I'm going to put this on a little thicker because I want to use texture to create some of the look of some of the grasses that are in that page. When they walked in the door, they were handed a little iPod called a shuffle, a little music player. Oh yeah, more paint, more texture, and a card with one question on it. And on the iPod was a playlist of all the Beatles songs. And the question was, what made the Beatles iconic? And they had created basically a museum of iconic memorabilia, documentaries, photographs, all these things about the Beatles. They were all the right generation of leaders and managers to have been raised listening to the Beatles. So they were very familiar with the Beatles. So again, this is that emotional exploration where it becomes this somatic experience where what I'm loving here is not just the color, but the actual making of the texture, right? Like there's something that is very nourishing. It's a way of moving all of that scatteredness that I'm feeling in my brain. I'm moving it out onto the page into something that feels a little more cohesive here. So I'm just at the meta level, sort of noticing my own process as I'm painting through the journey here. And I'm loving that I can still see colors and textures from underneath as well. And as the people walked in, they were given an hour to listen to the playlist, to walk around and interact and look at all the exhibits. And then he had them all sit very close together in two rows facing each other and asked the question, what makes the Beatles iconic? And he said it was fascinating to hear all the differing opinions. Like I was sharing this with my husband on our walk this morning, and he's like, songwriting. Songwriting was the thing that absolutely made them iconic, nothing else. And I'm like, well, underneath the songwriting is da 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 da, you know. So even just between the two of us, there was these differences, right, in conversation about what we think make the Beatles an iconic group. And I'm looking for my baby wipes. And then, of course, they talked about that for a while, and then they moved on to the story of okay, so what would make Starbucks an iconic brand, business, company like the Beatles? And it opened up a whole different conversation around what was possible. And I so appreciated what this guy who organize this training said about business that I think translate to the rest of our lives. So having been in business for a long time, like over 20 years now for myself, I've done a lot of work, a lot of study, a lot of reading, a lot of working on my own businesses. I'm on my third business. I love building businesses. And in business, they talk about efficiency and being lean, creating these lean models in order to increase productivity and profits. And he said what that's done, it's taken all our connection to creativity out of business building, and that efficiency is about skill building and creativity is about ingenuity, innovation, and where ideas come from. And I think that translates so powerfully to our own creative practice, where we get so caught up and focused on skills that we lose our own personal connection with creative play and practice. And the chapter goes on to talk about the power of play, but I'll save that for another day. Good morning, Judy. So I think that, we can think about our own creative practice through these lens and think about when we're making art, where are we getting stuck? Are we so focused on just building skills that we've lost the playfulness of it? Or are we so caught up in a preconceived notion of what we want something to look like that we also lose connection to that spark of curiosity, which truthfully is our greatest gift as human beings is that curiosity. Good morning, Tori. Good morning, good morning. All right. Lots of chatting because I'm kind of letting this dry. I'm going to want to add, I think, some yellow into that blue up there, and I'm going to want to bring these purple bubbles in. Again, it feels like a piece that's, coming together pretty quickly because I have no preconceived notion of where I want it to go, right? No preconceived notion of where I want it to go. Okay, so I'm going to get this drier. It's really wet. That paint is super thick on there. And I'm really wanting to dry this one, not blot it, because I want to keep a lot of that texture that is there. I'm going to turn this back around this way just so it's easier to reach. And I'm going to see if I can mix some yellow in. I might need to put a little white first so that I make sure that that yellow actually pops out. This is my absolutely favorite yellow. I go through so much of this Azo Yellow Deep by Amsterdam, one of my favorite yellows, but it's pretty transparent. Doesn't have a ton of opacity. And again, if we just play with the thickness of it, and my inner child is having so much fun. I sent a fun Instagram video I saw to a girlfriend who likes to be playful with her art as much as I do. And it was kids with, it was just tempera paint, but they had fly swatters and cotton balls covered in paint, and they were just splattering the paint. They were literally like whacking these colored cotton balls with these fly swatters, making these beautiful splatter paintings. And I had to send it to my friend because I'm like, this would be so much fun to do. And I think the more we can bring the fun back into our art making, letting go of our need to be precise or attached to our skill level, the more that it serves us at an emotional level as well as a neurobiological level of supporting our brain, because our brain learns through play. Always our brain learns through play, and this has been proven over and over again about how important play is and what a detriment it is that we have lost play even in our children, right, with our emphasis on achievement. It was so much fun, Marion. If I can find it online, not on Instagram, I'll send you a copy of the video. It's full. Okay, definitely needs a little white on here now. It's feeling kind of interesting. It's sort of kind of landscapey. All right. A mustard jar full of paint works pretty well. Actually, I think maybe if I go with a little smaller mark, I don't want all my marks to look the same. I am loving this little tool. Again, this is just a little scraper. I don't know if it came with a gel plate that I got or in a kit from some retreat that I did. But these kind of texture making tools, you can get them anywhere. I have quite a few of them, and I often use them, especially on big canvases, because it's so much fun to create the texture. So we're just getting lots of texture, lots of play, again, mimicking what I'm seeing in this photo in terms of texture, lines, all the different shapes. So I love this dark dividing line, so I want to make sure I add that. And then I'm going to add these little bubbles in here, and we'll see what we can get to today. And I'm even thinking that line is just simply going to be black, and we'll see what does it look like if I just put some dramatic black right down the center of this. I have a little bit of black still peeking through underneath from that initial drawing that I did. And again, I love the idea of seeing each of these canvases as a palimpsest. Palimpsest is one of my favorite words. If you're not familiar with what a palimpsest is, the idea came from ancient Egypt, I think, is the origin of the concept, but it came before we had paper and the luxury of paper that we had today. And people were sometimes writing on stone. So think the Ten Commandments or the Rosetta Stone, or they were writing on papyrus or leather, and they would reuse it and scrape away what was there and write over the top of it, but they were never able to just 100% scrape away what was initially created. So you create this sort of magical, multi layered new meaning from the layers of the old and the new. And that's how I feel about my intuitive painting practice when I'm just painting over and over the same canvas for days on end. And eventually it will just tell me that it's complete. And I will know, right, that it's done. And how do I know that it's done? There's no easy answer for that, but I do know, right? Like, so I don't judge it. I just trust that. Sometimes they're done for days and I need to move on, right? To paint something else. And then I will come back to it again when I know where to go next. So it's not like I'm painting every day over the same thing. Sometimes I do take a pause or a break. All right, so I want to get some that purple back that I started with and figure out where that purple went. Very good question. You wouldn't think it could go far if you saw the smallness of the space that I'm painting in. And for some of this more detailed work, I am switching to working with a brush. Some more of that white down. Way more white than I needed, but I never waste paint. I have a whole stack of these canvases, so I just grab another one or grab some blank paper and add that to something else so I never feel like it's getting mixed. I'm just going to let all these kind of mix together on the palette. That black get in there, gray that up just a little bit. We'll probably do some just different shades of those purples. And it's a weird color palette, right? But what I'm noticing is I'm just trusting that these are the colors I'm supposed to be painting. There's no right or wrong, not a normal palette for me. But again, there's something about the interconnectedness of all the different shapes and texture from that photo that sort of mirror how I'm feeling. Maybe, there's a little bit of calmness. Again, there's a lot of this scatteredness. I tend to go through these phases in my life and my work where I have these, huge bursts of creativity and ideation, and they tend to kind of take over. And so I have to just be mindful of that and do a lot of what I call brain dumping, where I'm just pouring all those ideas onto paper because once I get them out of my head, then I can set them aside until I have time to work on them. And just a quick reminder, I have my next fun mythical makeover happening in a couple of weeks. It starts on June 21st, inspired by the Nancy Drew mystery series. Super excited for that one. All right, so the bubbles, interestingly, aren't showing up that well. I'm also knowing that I'm being a little hesitant, I think because the paint underneath is still wet, and so I'm trying not to over mix it. But when I look at the photograph, what I love is how clustered it is. And so I'm going to need to get a lot more paint in there to kind of create these nice little clusters. So this was a picture I took after the outrageous hailstorm we had a couple of days ago, and so this is hail that was still left the next morning. Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited about the journal that I made for it as well. It came out super, super cute. Okay, so I'm going to hit this with the dryer. I realized I don't even have any water for my brushes over here this morning. So because I'm taking the time to walk before I get on the calls, I haven't quite settled into my new routine yet. So I'm going to get this nice and dry. And I want to get a lot more of that dark underneath to create some of the richness, I think. And then, add more highlights for those bubbles. I think I was going straight for the lights and I've got too much dark underneath. And because I'm layering this paint on really thick and creating lots of texture, which is super fun, but it takes a long time to dry. And I might have to come to a spot here where I just am feeling more patient and I give it that time to dry and step from it for a while. And I'm getting close to that feeling of, okay, walk away from the canvas. Can't quite see where you're going, or that feeling of not quite knowing what's next. Then you know it's time to walk away. When it starts to feel a little messy, a little scattered. And what's interesting, what I'm not loving is the copper color that this feels like it needs to be toned down. There's all this busyness and movement up here, and this isn't as calm as I wanted it to be. And actually that black is intriguing. So I think I'm going to come in with just a coat of gray over this and see what happens. Still got some black in my brush and a little bit of copper mixed in with that because I don't want to lose that sort of neutral color there, but it definitely needs to change. And that copper in there is pretty transparent, but it'll help warm up that gray a little bit. A nice pretty color going there. And what happens if I just come in and calm that color down? It's interesting, it's a little pinky. I'm also feeling like this definitely needs some of the black and the darks up there to give that top part a little more richness as well. So it's better. It's not quite perfect. It's better. My projection on your painting a campfire area ready to receive the spark in your, oh, I love that. You're having it out with your yard cleaning. Sorry, Blanca, that does not sound fun. All right. Feels like a campfire. It does have that energy, right? Of the sort of calmness down here and it's waiting for that spark. I love using baby wipes as a tool in my studio, and I often use it to remove paint, push things back. If I feel like I've got too much on there or that I want to smooth things out, or maybe I want to just see a little bit more of that texture underneath. So I got the effect that I wanted, which was just to calm that copper down just a little bit, but I don't want to lose all that lovely texture. There was something about those straight lines of the texture that just feel that calming and soothing. And so it just toned it down a little bit, right? It just toned it down a little bit. All right, so I'm going to come in here with a little bit of black and darken this up. And I'm going to do this with a brush because I want to change up the pattern of the lines. It's all feeling a little bit too much the same, and there needs to be some differences here, a little better contrast. Again, just sort of keeping all the colors on my palette mixed together. And maybe I want it even like a little more of that grassy look. And when the black and the yellow blend together, they make a gorgeous green. If you've never played with black and yellow together, I learned that from my friend Andrea. And I'm going to want this black to sort of disappear to the background. So I can guarantee you what's going to happen here is that I am going to get this black on there, and then I'm going to go back over it again with the other colors to sort of push that even more to the background. So you can see I'm taking a lot longer with this one than I did with the one yesterday. Already liking the black a lot better, so it's starting to make it feel like it's coming together. And that putting the darks up here are also going to make my little purple bubbles show out a lot more as well. I can still come back in and make that match a little bit. Blend it just a little bit more so it's not quite standing out so much. But I'm still getting some of those lights and those darks. Loving this sort of black shadow under here. Maybe bringing a little bit of the colors from up there down into here. Like just looking for how can I make this piece feel like it's all one piece instead of three separate pieces. So these are funny. They're kind of looking like wisteria now, which is one of my favorite flowers in the spring. All right, still wanting some longer, grassier, brushy marks. But what I'm sensing right now is that if I don't walk away with this, I'm just gonna mess it up. Like I know one of the next step is gonna be to come in here and whiten up those bubbles. But everything's too wet right now. So I'm gonna pause right here. This is my emotional landscape for the day of seeking some calm and having a lot of scattered creative ideas going as well. And I'll be back tomorrow to either finish it or paint over the whole thing. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, or I might finish this one later today and then let go of it tomorrow. But as always, I'm going to come in and take a picture of the progress of where I am. Again, all of these, it's great to just remember the progress of where we are. And then it's also, remember, always valuable to come into your painting and look at the color scale. So when I look at this on my screen, it's a little bright with the light, but there's not a ton of contrast. It's pretty monochromatic with a few little dark places and a lot of white, so I can still work on my balance of those lights and darks. So even though this is an emotional landscape where I'm painting through my feelings, I'm not thinking about the more skill-based artistic part of it. Like it's all about blending all of the bits together to get something that feels like it's representing where I am and how I'm feeling in the moment. And I couldn't have gotten here to this look if I hadn't started by simply painting over what was already on the canvas. So thanks as always for joining me live. Thanks for watching the replay. Please hit that like button if you like the video. If you're here for the first time, be sure to subscribe so you get notified when I go live. And I will see you all back at the same canvas bright and early tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. Have a beautiful rest of your day, everybody. Bye-bye.